All right, welcome back to One Israel News. It's now 11 March, and I've been quite busy working on some other projects, and so we're going to get back into the Israel-Hamas war, and back on the subject of Jonathan Pollard. So, what can I say? They've done exactly what I thought they would do. Like I said, if you're a exterminator and your job is to eliminate cockroaches and rats, if you kill off all the rats and the cockroaches in the world, guess what? You're out of business. Nobody has a need for you. Okay? So this is what I said, essentially, is the relationship between Likud, specifically Bibi Netanyahu, and Hamas. If he eliminates them, we have no need for Bibi or Likud. Okay? If he destroys them and wipes them out, we don't need our rat catcher. We don't need our exterminator, right? Because when you have nothing else, he has no housing program, he has no jobs program, he has no, any kind of program except security, right? Do we all feel safer than we did, I don't know, when he came into power in 2009? I mean, can you believe it's 2024, and in 2009, 2024 minus 2009, 15 years ago is when this asshole came into power, and we're still just running around the rat wheel, going faster and faster and faster, and never going anywhere. No progress, nothing. And that's what you do when you're a fascist state. It's called the dynamic of tension. You always want there to be tension so people can't think. People can't rationalize. It's always a state of fear. And when you seem to be creating or letting the fear happen, on one hand, with your left hand, and on your right hand, you're providing supposedly the solution. But for 15 years, this asshole hasn't solved the problem. My God. A bunch of grannies with goddamn umbrellas could have gone into Gaza and wiped out Hamas in 15 fucking years. But here we are. And now that we have the perfect reason to go in and destroy Hamas, wipe them out, we're in Gaza, we're killing God knows how many people, bombing God knows how many people, and what do? We don't complete the job. He backs off. The hostages are sitting right there in Rafah, within 2 miles, 5 kilometers of our troops. We could go in tomorrow and rescue all the hostages, and some are going to die. That's just part of it. Some of the hostages are going to die. We're not going to rescue all of them. Let's get that really clear. Okay? Probably half of them are going to die. But half is better than none, right? So, and we could go in tomorrow and wipe out all of Hamas. Kill every one of them. And they'll have no future. But what has he been doing the last month? Just dawdling around, doing nothing, while the political pressure builds and builds for him to not do anything and to slow down and to have a fucking 6 months, 6 weeks, 6 months ceasefire? Why? Why should there be a ceasefire? The sooner we go into Rafah and wipe out Hamas, the sooner they can start feeding the Palestinians and bring in the convoys that won't get stolen by Hamas. So it seems to me that a ceasefire is only causing more suffering for the Palestinians, for the hostages, and for the Israeli people. So I'm not for a ceasefire. I mean, come on. In March of 1945, if all of a sudden the United Nations and the rest of the world had called for the U.S. and Britain to hold a ceasefire so we can bring in convoy trucks to save these poor, starving Germans who didn't know about the Holocaust, right? Remember that? Oh, we didn't know. But can you imagine if the UN or the majority of the world were telling the American Army and the British Army and the Canadian Army and the French, oh, stop at, where you're at, stop at the Rhine, stop at whatever you're at, and we're going to have a ceasefire for 6 months so we can bring in convoys to feed the poor, starving, ignorant German people who don't know about the Holocaust, right? It's just unbelievable. Unbelievable. Can you imagine if in August of 1945, after we dropped the 2 bombs on Hiroshima, the United Nations or the rest of the world came out and says, oh, those poor, starving, irradiated Japanese, we need to have a ceasefire for at least 6 months so we can go in and bring, the UN can build a dock in Tokyo Bay and bring in food to feed the poor, starving Japanese people. Ceasefire, 6 months. That way it gives the Japanese more time to build up arms, build up fortifications, getting ready for an American invasion, right? That wouldn't have gone. That wouldn't have happened. That would have been insanity. Nobody would have accepted that. Okay? Nobody. Unconditional surrender. Why is it we insisted on unconditional surrender of the Japanese and the Germans for their atrocities that they committed, but Hamas, they get a break. Ceasefire. A hudna. So they can rearm. They can dig more tunnels. They can hide more hostages. They can steal more, UN food. It's insanity. Finish the job, BB. I've been really patient and quiet about not saying anything bad against you. And remember where we were right before the war. We were near a civil war between the left and the right in Israel. Remember that? Because Bibi was trying to assert his will on the courts and have no separation of powers. Majority rule, right? That's not democracy. That's autocracy. Remember, until October 7th, we were nearly at civil war against Bibi. Remember that? So I've been really patient and really quiet, hoping that this time, out of God knows how many, eight times now in 15 years, we've had a war with Hamas, that he would do the job. Finish the job, Bibi. And here we are. It's been 155 days since the atrocities of October 7th. 155 days over 5 months. And here we are, throwing rocks and pebbles and dawdling on the outskirts of Rafah while our hostages are being starved to death and tortured and raped. And we do nothing. We have victory in our hands. Like now. We could end this tomorrow. tomorrow we could send in the tanks and it would all be over in one day. But here we are, sitting across the polluted Gaza Creek from Rafah, throwing stones with our fingers up our ass, while the world mobilizes to stop us. Finish the job, BB. Yeah, your days are numbered. Okay? We're going to come after you after this war is over. We're going to come after you and throw your ass out of office. That's another reason that BB is not doing what he needs to do. Because in order for him to stay in power, the crisis must continue. As soon as the crisis ends, he knows his days are numbered. He knows there'll be an inquiry of why Hamas was able to get past all intelligence, and he knows that he'll be held accountable for this and many other things. And so he wants to keep dancing. The music can't stop, because as soon as the music stops, he's out. So the war must go on. It never end. You know, it's like a bad version of that 1984 book. They go from war to war. One war with, Europa versus Pacifica, Pacifica versus America. As soon as one war ends, another war begins. Because without the state of tension, the people don't need the government. They don't need to have fear. People realize they don't need Bibi or Likud. But we do need this war to be finished. We do need Hamas to be destroyed. Now, we're all realistic. We all know that even if we go into Rafah and wipe them out and capture most of them, that some of them are going to get away to Egypt and are going to escape into Jordan. There's going to be still some people calling themselves Hamas, okay? Just like there's still some remnants of Al-Qaeda. And there's still some remnants of, what's that other hybrid group that came out of Al-Qaeda? There's always going to be those things. But just like there's always going to be COVID, little COVID variants running around, the majority of COVID got wiped out because we took action. Bibi took action, actually, in Israel. So, I'm going to end this here. Invade Rafah, Bibi. Wipe them out. Look, we'll make a deal, okay? You go in, you wipe out Hamas, okay? Free the hostages and end this war, and then we can get back to feeding the Palestinians and give Biden his little dock, let them feed the Palestinians and send in a UN force or whatever. We promise you won't go to prison. You'll just have to quit being prime minister. Okay? And retire. You're fucking in your 70s. Go retire. And you won't face prosecution. Just retire. Do the country a favor. We'll reward you for destroying Hamas by not sending your ass to prison. How about that? That's the deal. Destroy Hamas, rescue the hostages in this war, and we won't send you to prison. It's as simple as that. Now, again, like I said, we could end this war tomorrow. Send in the tanks tomorrow. And let's end this war. The choice is up to you. All right. On to the next subject. All right, so we're going to read more about Traitor Jonathan Pollard. Okay? So Jonathan Pollard was born in Galveston, Texas, 1954, to a Jewish family, the youngest of three siblings born to Morris and Mildred Molly Kahn Pollard. In 1961, his family moved to South Bend, Indiana, where its father, Morris, an award-winning microbiologist, taught at the University of Notre Dame. At an early age, Pollard became aware of the horrific toll of the Holocaust had taken on his immediate family, and on his mother's side of the family, the Kahns, from Vilna in Lithuania. And shortly before his bar mitzvah, he asked his parents to visit the Nazi death camps. Pollard family made a special effort to instill a sense of Jewish identity in their children, which included devotion to the cause of Israel. All right. Pollard grew up with what he called a racial obligation to Israel. He made his first trip to Israel in 1970 as part of a science program visiting the Weizmann Institute of Science in Rehovot. While there, he was hospitalized after a fight with another student. One Weizmann scientist remembered Pollard's leaving behind a reputation of being a troublemaker. And that continues. After completing high school, Pollard attended Stanford University, where he completed a degree in political science in 1976. While there, he is remembered by several of his acquaintances of having boasted that he was a dual citizen of the United States and Israel, claiming to have worked for the Mossad, to have attained the rank of colonel in the Israel Defense Forces, even sending himself a telegram addressed to Colonel Pollard. So you can tell he's delusional from the very beginning. And to have killed an Arab while on guard duty at a kibbutz. Colonel kibbutz. Colonel doing guard duty at kibbutz? Okay. He also claimed that his father, Morris Pollard, was a CIA operative and to have fled Czechoslovakia as a child during the Prague Spring in 1968, when his father's CIA role there was discovered. Huh? None of these claims were true. Later, Pollard enrolled in several graduate schools but never completed a postgraduate degree. Pollard's future wife, Ann Henderson, who he abandoned, and she was very sick during the trial, born in 1960, moved to Washington, D.C. in the fall of 1978 to live with her recently divorced father, Bernard Henderson. In the summer of 1981, she moved into a house on Capitol Hill with two other women, and through a friend of one of her roommates, she first met Pollard. He later said he had fallen in love during his first meeting and that they were an inseparable couple by November 1981, and in June of 1982, when her Capitol Hill lease expired, she moved into Pollard's apartment in Arlington, Virginia. In December 1982, the couple moved into downtown Washington, D.C. to a two-bedroom apartment at 1733 20th Street Northwest near DuPont Circle. Alright, so hold on one second. Pollard began applying for intelligence service jobs in 1979 after leaving graduate school, first at the Central Intelligence Agency and then at the U.S. Navy. Pollard was turned down from the CIA after taking a polygraph in which he admitted to prolific illegal drug use from 74 to 78. I think they used to have his polygraph and his CIA application information online, and basically he just lied about everything. He lied about stuff that there was really no need for him to lie about. Pollard would lie just for the sake of lying, for no reason. I mean, he would make up shit, and when he had no reason to lie. And the thing you have to understand is that if you're going to be an agent, you don't want you want to keep your lies to the minimum, and everything, any lie that you have, you want that related at the minimum, the bare minimum of the lie, and have it related to something that's true. Okay? Because first of all, they can be found out if people do enough research. Second of all, you're not going to pass the polygraph. All these kinds of things. But they found out, this is why the CIA turned him down. He was lying about shit for no reason. They really didn't have a reason to lie. Anyway. He fared better with the Navy, and on September 19th, 1979, he was hired by the Navy Field Operation Intelligence Office, an office of the Naval Intelligence Command, as an intelligence. Wow, 1979, and he got arrested in 85. That's 6 years. I always thought he had only been there maybe 2 years. But anyway, that's interesting. As an intelligence specialist, he was to work on Soviet issues at the Navy Ocean Surveillance Information Center, a department of the NFOIO. A background check was required to receive the necessary security clearances, but no polygraph test. So, background checks, all that is good for screening, but it's not going to screen out everybody. Okay? Because when I was in the military, I had a roommate who ended up trying to kill this girl. And he had security clearances up the yin-yang. Okay? Been background checked and everything, and everyone thought he was like one of the best persons there. And, his commanders all said praises for him. Matter of fact, the poor girl who got her whole face beaten and bashed in and bloodied ended up in the hospital. Not one person on the base, except for me, went to go see the girl. Because the girl, she wanted to get out of the military, so she kept going AWOL. And this embarrassed this guy because his friend was married to this girl. And I guess the police had surmised that they had made a deal between this guy and the husband to kill her and make her disappear, and then they were going to collect the very tiny bit of life insurance that the military provided. Very, very stupid, but this guy was brilliant, according to everybody that I knew on the base, and there were plenty of other people that defended him, and it was a very frightening time, and I was glad that I got out, because all the people, my job was completely different, not intelligence or security related, but all the people that had intelligence and security backgrounds and background checks, and it all been cleared and all been praised by their superiors, were all a bunch of fucking psychopathic nuts. Okay? All 20-year-olds just ready to kill at any moment. It was a very, very frightening thing to see. It's one thing to have an idiot who kills someone. It's another thing to have really, really smart people who believe, almost like cult-like, in what they're doing and are willing to kill for it. That's a whole nother level. Anyway, so I will tell an interesting story that because I was his roommate, although I did a different job and didn't really hang out or socialize with this guy, they wanted to keep me until his trial. And I was supposed to get out. And so they ended up keeping me like an extra 2 months. And I was ready to go because I was tired of dealing with all these, watching all these crazy people run around. And they would literally go through the dorms at night and shout so people could hear through the doors that anybody talks to the police is going to wake up with their fucking throats cut one day. So be very, very careful who you talk to. And that was enough for me. And so I kept asking my commander when they're going to let me leave. And they said, well, you got to hold you around to the trial. And I don't know anything. I told the CID I don't know anything. but they still wanted to keep me till the trial. And to jump ahead, luckily there was no trial. The guy completely confessed, hoping from his lawyers, hoping he would get a lighter sentence. He ended up getting like 15 years in prison. But I mean, you should have saw this poor girl. She was completely bloodied and beaten. Her eyeball was sticking out, and it was pretty hard. He would have murdered her on the side of the street in Pacific Grove in the back of his car if a policeman hadn't have pulled up and saw the car rocking with the engine going and lights on. And he actually, you hear him now, he's like some kind of evangelical running around talking about his experience. And he said that he had intended to kill the policewoman who got out of the car, but she pulled his gun and almost shot him. And so he had like a big mag flashlight. Anyway, so I ended up going to my congressman, who, by the way, at the time happened to be Leon Panetta, which is very interesting because this is like 1989, and the military just really didn't like Leon Panetta that much, okay, because he was always sticking it to them. He was on the Military Oversight Budget Committee or something like that, and, you know, why are you paying $200 for a toilet seat? Well, we all know now that the reason they were doing that is they were padding the budget to hide black and covert operations, okay? So you can't put in there, you know, a budget for a spy plane, or then the Soviets would just read about it and know about everything we have. So they keep the spy stuff or the black projects covered up, and then they spread those costs among all the other things that we don't care about, hammers and toilet seats and stuff like that, and it looks like it's $200 for a damn toilet seat. But anyway, so Leon Panetta, I went to him, I told him, I said, look, I was supposed to get out 2 months ago. They won't let me out because of this situation that's going on with this guy, and I don't know anything. And then within like a week, my commander, I'm not going to get it real, I eventually got out. And the commander was not very happy with me. He was screaming at me for going to Leon Panetta. I didn't know Leon Panetta, 20 years later, would become the head of the CIA and also the head of the Defense Department or something like that. So I find that kind of ironic. And but yeah, Leon Panetta, good old Leon Panetta, really helped me out. Because, you know, people don't know this, but once you get in the military, they can hold you forever. They can make up any kind of excuse. They don't have to let you out. And even when you're out, if they want you back, depending on your field, in the time you've been out, they can call you back. And there's nothing you can do about it. Because that big stack of paper you sign, that says all that in there, you know. But, yeah, Leon Panetta, he was able to get me out, thank God. I basically, and I told my commander that, you know, you've got a bunch of psychopaths in the dorm threatening to kill people if they talk, and this is why I want to get out of here, you know. So passing a background check and having a security clearance, all these guys had security clearances, they all had background checks, but they were still all a bunch of fucking psychopaths. They had guns and knives, and they threatened to use them on anybody who talked to the CID. Anyway, and it's just really irritating because this guy is now running around after serving 15 years in prison talking about Jesus and forgiveness and all this stuff. And not one of his videos that I've watched does he ever regret what he did to that poor girl, beating her face in with the mag flashlight, you know, these long black mag flashlights. He had tried to get her drunk, and basically what he was going to do, they found in the reason he got 15 years, because they found in the back of the car he had a machete, an axe, some wire, some cement blocks, and some garbage bags. He was going to kill her, chop her up, and throw her body parts into the ocean. Okay, it wasn't a simple just assault. And then he he got her drunk, and she was in the back of the car, and he was taking her to go chop her up. And that's, thank God, she woke up and tried to get out, and he pulled over to a side street and went in the back seat, started beating her with a mag flashlight in her face. Thank God the police showed up. Thank God. That's all we can say. Thank God. But this guy everyone thought was brilliant. He got straight A marks in his, I think he was in Russian school or Czech school or whatever that was, language school, and passed a background check, everything. The guy was brilliant. Everyone loved him. Got nothing but exemplary marks from his commander, And people were mad at me and mad at her for causing embarrassment for the base. Well, not to mention that, because I'd gone to the congressman, but not to mention that the guy tried to, that they all praise as a fucking almost murderer. But anyway, very frightening. But that was my experience, and although most of my experience in the military was good, it was that very, very last part that was very disturbing. Anyway, that's the long side tangent there. So, just because someone's got a security clearance and if they've gone through an FBI background check doesn't mean, you can trust them with your children or your money or whatever, or your life. You have to take each individual on an individual basis. Anyway, in addition to a top secret clearance, a more stringent, sensitive, compartmented information, SCI clearance, was required. The Navy asked for, but was denied, information from the CI regarding Pollard, including results of the pre-employment polygraph test revealing Pollard's excessive drug use. Now, see, they should be sharing that stuff nowadays, right? But anyway, Pollard was given a temporary non-SCI security clearance pending completion of his background check, which was normal for new hires. At the time, he was assigned to temporary duty at another NIC department, the Naval Intelligence Support Center, Surface Ships Division, where he would work on tasks that did not require SCI clearance. NOCIC's current operations center and the NISC were co-located in Suitland, Maryland. All right. So we're going to stop there and go on to a video. All right, let's take a look at this. Oh, and this came out in 2005. This is a Jonathan Pollard, American Fall Guy. So this is before he gets out of prison. But I have a sneaky suspicion that this is going to be kind of like revisionist history of Jonathan Pollard's real deal. The dirty deeds he committed.
Jonathan Pollard is the most controversial spy in American history. He had done what no other person in history has ever done: spied on the United States of America for Israel.
This was a very serious incident of espionage, staggeringly serious.
Pollard wasn't just giving selective pieces of information that might be of interest to Israel. It was a vacuum cleaner of information.
This was one of the most unethical prosecutions that I have seen in 40 years of practicing law.
Good Lord.
November 1985. Jonathan Pollard, a Jewish American, and his wife Annie race through the streets of Washington, D.C. as several FBI agents follow in unmarked cars. Pollard, an analyst with U.S. Naval Intelligence, is a suspected spy.
If I have to go back to the beginning of my whole nightmare, I would say that, first of all, the
Oh, wow.
case
She
probably
lived.
could have been settled quietly, probably back within the Israeli embassy, and no one in the universe would ever have heard of Jonathan Pollard or myself.
Huh.
As he turns the corner on Van Ness Street, it becomes clear where he's headed. The Israeli embassy.
I think he truly believed that they would absolutely welcome him with open arms, that he was, in their mind, he had to be a hero.
Initially, Jonathan and I both were welcome. We were told we were welcome, very welcome. We were home to just sit and wait in or near the car, and that they were going to go inside and make arrangements. And then 10 minutes later, the security guard came out in a very scary, fearful kind of look, and in a very adamant tone told Jonathan and I to, quote, "Get out."
So, at the time, okay, you got to understand there's like the right wing and the intelligence service in Israel. The government was a coalition of the left and the right, where I think it was Yitzhak Shamir served 2 years, and Shimon Peres, or was it Rabin, served 2 years as president, as prime minister. Unfortunately, for Pollard at this time, I believe. Hold on, let me double check something. I'm going to double check something here. So here you go. So you see, they had a coalition because nobody could get enough votes. So they had, what was it, Yitzhak Shamir. Let's see if I got this right. Yeah, Yitzhak Shamir took over from Menachem Begin. I believe he resigned. I think health reasons. And when Jonathan Pollard started his term, Yitzhak Shamir, right wing, was in power. Now, it wasn't the Mossad that was dealing with Jonathan Pollard. There was this another spy agency that was, eventually it got eliminated, and I think it was the Rat. What was that guy's name? Anyway, we'll go across it. It was trying to make a name for himself for that agency, and I believe Jonathan Pollard had approached the Mossad, but they didn't want to have anything to do with him. So he approached this colonel, and the colonel put him in touch with this other agency that basically gathered, I can't remember the name of this agency, but it was basically set up to gather technical information, maybe even nuclear technology, but definitely, computer technology, more technical information than, say, human intelligence. And so it was under the right-wing Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir, you see, up until September 13th, 1984. And then they had an election, and the deal was that Shimon Peres would serve 2 years, and then Yitzhak Shamir would serve like 2.5 years, whatever. So what happened is, in the interim, so Yitzhak Shamir got advised or told about this set of information that they're getting from this agent Pollard, okay? So he proved it. Yeah, go for it. Get as much as you can, okay? When Shimon Peres came in, they were already getting the information. They tried to keep it secret from him, okay? But what happened is, when Pollard got found out, he went to the embassy. They were trying to, I believe, I think this was right around the time also that the failure of the Lahav Israeli fighter jet occurred. So Israel, they tried to make their own domestic type fighter jet, and it just blew up in their face and didn't work. So they were desperately needing to upgrade their fighter jets, and they wanted to keep getting parts for the F-16s and F-15s and didn't want to upset that. And there were people like, John Panetta or Leon Panetta and other Democrats that were controlling Congress that were really willing to cut off Israel aid because of things like Osirik and all these other things. So Shimon Peres didn't want to upset the apple cart. So when Jonathan Pollard got there, security guards, they're all, probably right-wing, been there in their job for a while. They wanted him there. They wanted to give him protection and asylum. Probably even the ambassador. But anything you do has international implications like that, especially dealing with the United States. You got to get that approved. And so when they call back to Jerusalem, Shimon Peres says, hell no. There's no fucking way we're going to upset our relationship with the United States. Give this guy up. And that's what they did. The Israelis sold him out. Okay? And if I was the Israeli prime minister, I would have done exactly this. Exactly the same thing. Okay? Because having some guy go off to prison, some individual, is far less important than protecting, 5 million Jews with the airplanes that they needed, not getting those parts cut off. So you have to weigh, you have to weigh the importance of things. And frankly, Jonathan Pollard didn't measure up very much when it came to getting Israeli fighter jet parts. I'll just put it to you that simple. So that's why you're going to see here in the video, they send him back out. So that's kind of a long explanation of what happened, but that's essentially what happened. That's why the Israelis cut him loose.
And get out now.
Jonathan Pollard, the man who had taken great personal risks to spy for his spiritual homeland, was shocked.
He was horrified. He's looking at the security guard and he says, do you know who I am? Do you know what I've done? And he says, I don't care. I want you to get out.
What did the Israeli embassy staff do? They virtually threw him out the front door into the hands of the waiting FBI.
Yeah, no shit. That's their job, okay? So when you're sent to be part of an embassy staff, okay, your loyalty is to the country, and if your commander tells you to do something, you damn well better do it regardless of your political beliefs. And that's the way it is in every country and every service, whatever. Okay?
Breaking the golden rule of intelligence. Never abandon an agent.
Huh.
The rest is a sad litany of betrayal.
When they send agents on deep cover missions, they even have that, in Mission Impossible, that if you're caught, the agency will deny all and any knowledge of your mission and all these kinds of things. You have to be able to do that, okay? And those people go into those missions knowing that that could happen. And that's the price that you have to be willing to pay to serve your country. You have to say, hey, my family, my children are back there in the country, and if I have to sacrifice myself and die in order that they may live a little longer, then that's what we're going to do. The problem with Jonathan Pollard is he has no loyalty and had no loyalty and has no loyalty to anyone. His only loyalty is to Jonathan Pollard. You're going to see Anne here. He abandons Anne. She's sick. He completely separates himself from her, doesn't give a damn about her. Okay? It's only to serve Jonathan Pollard. Not one thing did Jonathan Pollard do benefit the United States nor Israel, because it set up Israel and the United States to have this distrust, a mutual distrust, all because of Jonathan Pollard. Okay?
Jonathan Pollard, a U.S. Navy intelligence analyst, was arrested and charged with spying.
Pollard, a civilian Navy counter-terrorist expert, reportedly passed information to...
Pollard had been spying for a year and a half. Enough time, officials say, for Pollard to fill 30 file cabinets.
The U.S. government offers Pollard a deal. If he pleads guilty, Pollard believes the government will recommend a lenient sentence.
The fact that his defense counsel advised him to a plea bargain, I don't think there's anything sinister in that. Let's cut a deal. Otherwise they're going to screw you into the floor.
That's right.
Key away. Yeah, there's only one problem with that. That's precisely what they did.
No, they didn't do that. They offered him the deal. They had the plea bargain. They had the whole deal. The only stipulation that the judge told him was, because all of the documents are so sensitive, to not write about it, talk about it with the media, disclose any information. And what did he do as soon as he got the goddamn plea deal? He went on with Wolf Blitzer and did an entire interview detailing what he gave the Israelis, how he had it, all this kind of detailed information that he'd agreed in the plea bargain not to do. And the judge threw the book at him. Okay? If you make a deal with somebody, and see, this goes down to the character of Jonathan Pollard, that you can't trust him. Just like from the CIA, he's a congenial liar. It's all about himself. It's all about his ego. He didn't tell Wolf Blitzer what he gave the Israelis to help the Israelis or to, I don't know, help his case. He bragged about it like, hey, I'm such a great, brilliant spy that I was able to get this information and that information. And he told it to Wolf Blitzer. And Wolf Blitzer broadcast that on the TV. The judge was out of his mind about that. Because if you make an agreement with someone, you know, it's no different if you make a deal with your wife. Okay? Say you got a girlfriend, or say you're doing drugs, or say you're drinking, and then you made a deal with her. Okay, I'll let you back in the house, we'll stay married, as long as you promise to not see that girl, or not drink, or not do drugs. Oh, I promise, sweetie, it's not going to happen again. I promise, promise, promise. And then what do? As soon as you get back in the house, within a week, you're running around with this girl again, or you're out there drinking, or out there doing drugs. What do you think your wife's going to do? Throw your ass back out of the house and divorce your ass. It's the same thing with Jonathan Pollard. You're only as good as your word. Your oath to your country. He signed a bunch of papers saying he would never, ever give away or disclose the information that he had to anyone. Because it's not in his pay grade to make that decision to where that paper go and where that information goes. Oh, but they gave it to Israelis. They're our ally. That's true, but it's not his right to give that information to the Israelis. I mean, are all analysts now, after Pollard, allowed to just, oh, well, I'm going to give this information to Australia, and I'm going to give this information to Mexico, and I'm going to sell this information to the Brits because I think they deserve it, right? I'm qualified. I'm an analyst. I have a top secret clearance. It's my decision to give them this information because in my judgment, they need it or deserve it, right? Now you've got, instead of one guy in charge, who should be the president of the fucking United States, and Congress, you've got 20, 1,000 different analysts deciding on American foreign policy. And you just can't have that. Because we didn't elect those analysts to be foreign policy decision makers. We elected the president. And the president appointed people that were approved by Congress to do. There's a whole process here, okay? And we set up rules on disclosure of that information. And just because you think that so-and-so deserves to get that information, that's not your right. It's not your right. If you don't agree with it, then fucking quit your job and go fucking run for president. Okay? But see, this all goes back to the character of Jonathan Pollard. That in his ego, he thinks he's smarter than everyone else. He's better than everyone else. Your rules don't apply to me. They apply to all the little peons who signed that paperwork. And yeah, I may have lied when I signed that paperwork, and it clearly says that you shall not disclose this information to any unauthorized personnel. But I'm above the fray. I'm not the peon. I walk between the raindrops, okay? This is what Jonathan Pollard, it all has to do with his personality. And you see that even today, he hasn't changed one fucking bit. He's still the same lying son of a bitch that he was since, college at least. So anyway, I'll rave on about him for a long time. Just really pisses me off. Right, and here we go. And I went over this last time, but it says, Jonathan Pollard calls for hostages' families to be silenced, arrested. Okay? So, what he's saying is that if you protest against the government to get the hostages released, then Israel's not a democracy. It should be whatever the government wants it to be, right? The people work for the government instead of the government works for the people. And they should be arrested for protesting, expressing their point of view. Jonathan Pollard, who spent 30 years in prison as an espionage charges, was released in light of intensive public and diplomatic efforts calling for families of hostages. In light of intensive public and diplomatic efforts call for families of hostages to be silenced, included by imprisonment in a video with Macron Shiloh. So, in Jonathan Pollard's bizarre logic, then everybody who protested and petitioned for his release from prison should have been thrown in jail in the U.S. and Israel because, you're not allowed to protest a decision by the government, right? Right, Jonathan? That's what we're looking at here? Pollard called the ceasefire and hostage release deal a monstrous blunder. When we declared war, the first thing that the government should have done was declare a state of national emergency and told all the hostage families, you will keep your mouth shut and we will shut them for you. Wow. I agree the hostage deal is a blunder, but people have a right to speak out because we have a fucking democracy. I know you're used to, 23-hour lockdowns, being told when to go to sleep, when to wake up, when to go to the bathroom, when to eat, when to do your exercise and all that kind of stuff. Maybe that got into your brain. That's the way normal people do things for 30 years. But in a democracy, you have to accept there's going to be people who are just going to disagree with you, and they have a right to disagree with you. Jonathan Pollard. You will not interfere in our management of this war. You will not be used by the international community, or by our own leftists who manage the Galat Shalit deal as a weapon against us. If that means imprisoning to silence certain members of the hostage families, then so be it. Good Lord, what a fucking lunatic. Oh, I pray I never see you on the street, Jonathan Pollard, because you're going to get a knuckle fucking sandwich, you old piece of shit. Anyway. Alright, so let's see what else we got here. It says, civilian employee... Wait, hold on one second. So this is an article from November 21st from the UPI, 1985. Civilian employee of Navy Investigative Service was charged on Thursday with espionage and theft of government property, and sources said he claimed connection with the Israeli government. The FBI said Jonathan Pollard, 31, was arrested in Washington, D.C. based on charges filed in federal court, federal complaint before U.S. Magistrate Patrick Aldridge. The investigation was conducted by the FBI and Naval Investigative Services. Hold on one second. And the FBI said if convicted, Pollard could be sentenced to 10 years in prison, a $10,000 fine, or both. See, that's the thing. He could have gotten 10 years, probably would have been out in 5 and on probation for another 5, and then he could have been in Israel. But because he went out and boasted and talked about, hey, I'm this great spy, and da-da-da-da-da, and I stole this, and I gave him that, and da-da-da-da-da, when the judge specifically told him not to, and he agreed that if you do talk about this, this is what's going to happen. But he went out in defiance because, again, this is another part of his personality, that he's better than the judge. He knows more than the government. He knows more than the judge. He's above the fray. He walks between the raindrops, okay? And he knows better than everyone else, you and I. And therefore, when he gets busted and boasts and gets thrown in prison, it's an injustice, right? I'm so great. I'm so wonderful. I'm a fantastic, brilliant person. It's just you don't recognize how my brilliance, okay? That therefore you should bow down and pay homage to me, right? Because I'm this great spy. Good Lord. The FBI would not comment on reports Pollard had connections to a foreign government, especially Israel, but sources who asked to remain anonymous said the reports were true. CBS News, quoting unnamed Justice Department sources, said Pollard has claimed he passed secrets to the Israelis in exchange for money. So there's another thing. The Reagan administration didn't want to embarrass the Israelis and didn't want to upset our relationship with the Israelis. And so therefore they said, okay, well, let this guy go to prison, you tell us what you know, and it'll just be one of these mistakes that happen. Okay? And slap him on the hand and don't let it happen again. Oh, and here's your F-16 and F-15 spare parts. But don't let it happen again. But, you know, this is why the Israelis and the Americans kept it all quiet and had no comment in the beginning. But that wasn't enough for Jonathan. You know, what do you mean? This is my great moment to shine. I did all this for Israel. La la la. It's my moment to shine. So if you're not going to say anything about it, I'm going to say something about it. That's why he did the Wolf Blitzer interview. Pollard, who has worked for the Naval Investigative Service for one years, reportedly was arrested outside the Israeli embassy and charged with retention of classified documents, part of the espionage law, and theft of government property to be used to the advantage of another country. He was held without bail. And the same thing with, this guy in Russia that was living in Hawaii. I can't remember his name. But anyway, it escapes me right now. I'm having a mental block. You know, he knew the rules. He signed the contract. You know, if you sign a contract and it says you're not going to do this and you shouldn't do that, and if you do, this is what's going to happen, and then you do it, then you got no excuse. Okay? It's no different than when you go read the driver's manual, and it says at stop signs, you're going to stop. At red lights, you're going to stop. When there's a speed limit, you're not going to go over it. And if you do, this is what's going to happen. You're going to get a ticket. You're going to get time in jail. You're going to get your license suspended. All these things, there's consequences. There's actions that you're not allowed to do. And if you do them, this is the consequences. Okay? And then in order to get your license, because you've read all that, that's why we're giving you the license. The people are giving you the license because you've agreed to these terms. We'll let you drive, but you've got to do this. Stop at stoplights and stop at stop signs and no speeding. And you agree, and you sign that. Don't be running around crying to the news media if you go 100 miles an hour in a fucking red Ferrari and the police chasing you, don't stop, and finally you get arrested and end up in jail. Don't be crying and saying, oh, it's a great injustice, and you got to let me out, and have people protesting for you. Bullshit. You knew the rules, and you violated them. And then you went out there and boasted about, well, I did this, and I drove 100 miles an hour, and I was in that red Ferrari, and wow, it did a great YouTube video and a TikTok video, and Who gives a fuck? You knew the rules, and you agreed to not break the rules, and you did it anyway. That's called being an adult and adult consequences. That's what adults do. If you read and agree to certain terms and you go out and violate those terms, as an adult we have a right to punish you for violating those terms, just like everybody else. It's not like we're singling you out. Oh, you went 51 miles an hour in a 55, so we're going to give only you a ticket. Everyone else, we'll wait until they get to be 56 miles an hour. But only you are going to get a ticket. Okay? Bullshit. We live in an adult world with rules. And here he's boasting in his article earlier about rules that, no, they're not going to protest. They're not going to tell the government what to do, or we're going to lock them up. But yet, he wanted the U.S. government not to play by the rules that if you or I did what Jonathan did, we would all go to jail. And we should. That's the rules. Hello, Jonathan. Knock, 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 adult world. It's not, here's the rules for the rest of the world, and here's the rules or no rules for Jonathan. Little baby Jonathan, okay? No, it's the rules that cover everyone, Mr. Baby Jonathan, okay? It's not, they didn't pick you out, they didn't target you because you're Jewish. They targeted you because you broke the fucking rules. It's really fucking simple. So stop telling others to live by rules that you're not willing to live by. And stop threatening to lock up people that you disagree with, because that's not democracy. But for God's sakes, at least try to live by the shitty words that come out of your mouth. If you say it's wrong for people to do this, then they should follow the rules, then you should follow the fucking rules. So fuck you, Jonathan. Baby Jonathan. Alright. We'll keep going with this article. God, this shit just really every time I get in. This is why I don't do a video on this very often, because it just pisses me off. After 40 fucking years, this guy's still out there talking his shit, and people still believe he's a fucking hero, and he's a goddamn piece of shit. Anyway, CBS said Pollard is described as having stolen a broad range of information. There was no official comment, but CBS quotes sources as saying, the subject is so sensitive, Top administration officials were involved in drawing up the charges. At his arraignment, and here's something also. They didn't get him on everything because there were some papers that were so sensitive that not even the judge would be allowed to see them. Not even the prosecutor had authorization to see them. Okay? That's how sensitive. We're talking nuclear secrets, just like fucking Donald Trump. That piece of shit traitor there, who stole and gave away all that. You know, he makes Jonathan Pollard look like a joke. Gave all that information, put it unsecure in his bathroom so any fucking Tom, Dick, and Harry and Russian agent could walk in there and take pictures all goddamn day about our nuclear strategy. And that's what those papers were about, and I'm sure a lot more. Like, if the Russians do this with nuclear weapons, we're going to react this way. That way the Russians know what we're going to do. He gave away the game plan. Anyway, that's another sore subject with me. At his arraignment, the government reportedly charged Pollard in possession of substantial amounts of money. That it had obtained possession of a suitcase with Pollard's name on it on November 19th that had been passed from Pollard's wife to a third party, and that Pollard stated to federal agents the suitcase contained highly classified documents and information relating to national defense that he had passed to agents of a foreign government. So again, there's another thing. If you're authorized to see information, you're also obligated to protect that information. So if you take information home and you leave it on your desk and the housekeeper or the landlord or your friend comes over and touches it and looks at it, you've just committed a felony. But if you give it to your wife, she's committed a felony, you've committed a felony. And then she gives it to the neighbor, then she's committed another felony. So not only was he selfish and just getting himself in trouble, he also selfishly involved his wife unnecessarily, and she ends up going to prison also. All right. So this is a chronology from the Washington Post from 1986. September 19th, 1979, Jonathan Pollard is hired as an intelligence research specialist by the U.S. Navy Field Operations Intelligence Office. He holds a position within various Navy divisions until June 1984. Early 1984, Pollard tells an unidentified associate he is interested in meeting an Israeli military officer with whom the associate is acquainted. Summer 1984, Pollard meets the officer, Ave Sella, and agrees to pass classified documents to Sella and other Israeli representatives. During the summer, they have further meetings at which Pollard passes documents to Sella. June 1984, Pollard is assigned as watch officer for Anti-Terrorism Alert Center, Threat Analysis Division, Pollard Naval Investigative Division. Late summer, Sella tells Pollard he is returning to Israel and that Pollard will be assigned a new handler. October 1984, Pollard becomes an intelligence research specialist in the anti-terrorism. So he holds a high-level security clearance. November 1984, and his wife travel to Paris at Sella's direction for 2 days of meeting with Rafi Eitan. There we go, Rafi Eitan, identified as the head of the operation. Joseph Yeager, science counselor at the Israeli embassy, and Sella. After November 1984, Pollard removes documents from his office about 3 times weekly using a courier card that permits him to avoid being searched. He delivers the documents to Yeager and Arit Erb, an Israeli citizen who worked at the Israeli embassy at an apartment in Washington, every 2 weeks. So he was loading up his briefcase with documents. It's my understanding every Friday. And then he would take that every Friday over to this apartment. And they had bought a specific copy machine just for Pollard's documents. He'd leave the briefcase. They'd copy. A REIT was in there copying 12, 16 hours a day. All the documents, thousands of documents that he had in his briefcase. And this is like, you take 2 regular sized briefcases and you double it. That's the kind of case that he had. And then he would come back on Sunday night and pick up the documents and return them Monday morning. And he did this for 6 months to 9 months. He stole, up until Trump, Pollard stole more documents than any other spy in history. Enough to fill an entire apartment bedroom. From wall to wall, floor to ceiling. And if you think about how thick a piece of paper is, that's a document, just one stack will be thousands. If you figure one stack is 2,000 papers. And if you go from one wall to the next wall, think about that. That's 8 inches of 8.5 or 8 and 11 piece of paper. So you're probably looking at, let's just do some calculations. If you got a wall that's 10 feet across times 12 inches divided by 8, you got 15 stacks, okay? And then, if you've got the depth of the apartment, you're probably looking at 20 feet times 12 inches divided by 8. You're looking at 30 stacks, okay? This is just a rough estimate. I'm sure it could be more than this. So 15 times 30 is 450 stacks of paper. Okay, so if you're looking at it from the top, you can count across, left to right, top to bottom, 450 stacks of 2,000 or more pieces of documents in each stack. So 450 times 2,000. We're looking at over a million pieces of documents, all stamped top secret. If I, as a soldier, military personnel, or civilian employee in the Defense Department, took one document, and gave it to an unauthorized personnel to look at, I could go to jail for 5 years. Now this just happened back in the Trump administration when this girl, handler or hand or whatever her name was, gave a document about this Trump phone call unauthorized to a reporter. She went to jail for 5 years for one document. And Pollard had over 1 million documents. She gets 5 years for one piece of paper. Pollard had over 1 million documents. He's lucky he got out in 30 years. He could be in jail for 5 million years, okay? For one document, she got 5 years. Pollard had over 1 million fucking documents. Over 1 million. It's my understanding it was actually more, because instead of just a room, it was a swimming pool. 10 feet high, 20, 30 feet long, 10 feet across, equivalent of a swimming pool. So you're looking at 1 million to 3 million documents. This was not, and so what if it was an ally? Okay? Once you take those documents from a secure location and give it to someone else, you don't know where those documents are going to end up. How many Hamas, Hezbollah, Palestinian terrorists has Israel traded for Israeli hostages? How many classified documents has Israel traded for Israeli citizens kidnapped by terrorist groups? We don't know. We'll never know that. Because here's the problem, folks. One nation's priorities and loyalties are different than another nation's loyalties and priorities. And they may not always be the same, even though there may be allies and friends. Is it in Israel's best interest for America to build a dock off the coast of Gaza and feed the Palestinians? It wouldn't be my first option if I was Israel. But yet, that is this administration's priority. So you can see how they don't always match up. And I'll put it to you this way. If someone kidnapped your child and was torturing them or beating them or threatened to kill them, what would be the limits that you would impose on yourself in order to get that child back? There would be none. You wouldn't have any limits. So if you had to steal, if you had to kill, if you had to betray your country in order that your child, you could get your child back and they would live, don't you think you would do it? Because there's different priorities here. Your family and your children are more important than your country. So who is to know what happened to those 1 million or 3 million documents that Jonathan Pollard gave Israel and what they would have done to protect Israelis with those documents? You can't blame them. Once we give it away, we got no one to blame. And how many times have we done things that normally we wouldn't have done as a nation to protect our country or in our security interests? How many people have we killed? How many children have died in bombings and drone attacks just so we could get one guy, right? And how we would have been outraged if say some other country had done a drone attack on the United States and killed children, right? So don't let Jonathan lying Pollard fool you. It may have been an ally, but he had no right to give those documents away or make those decisions, especially in such a massive amount of documents. All right, so we're going to the next one here. So I think I had started on this, so if it looks familiar, I don't remember where I left off. This was an internal report done by the Director of Central Intelligence, put out on 30 October 1987. And it says the Jonathan J. Pollard espionage case, a damage assessment. So what happens inside an agency, and hopefully inside companies, is that when they suffer a hit, they suffer damage, they do a report, an assessment on what happened, how badly it damaged them, and how not to let it happen again. So this is what this is. And just like the 9/11 Commission, all these different things. So we're going to read through this. A lot of this has been redacted, but we'll read through and see what we can find. So it says, This study, undertaken by the Foreign Denial and Deception Analysis Committee, DAC, at the direction of the Director of the Central Intelligence, is one of two assessments of damage undertaken as a result of the Jonathan Pollard espionage on behalf of Israel during 1984-85, which are being issued almost simultaneously. The other is an assessment prepared for by the Department of Defense, of the Office of Naval Intelligence, and the Naval Investigators. So the CIA is doing a report, and the Navy Department's doing a report, is what it's saying. Where Pollard was employed during his espionage career, the principal drafters consulted closely during preparation of the two studies. Although they differ somewhat in detail and emphasis, there is mutual agreement concerning their findings. The study, so that's another thing. So the Navy is the one that got damaged. Jonathan Pollard was in the Navy employ. So just like any company, you don't want to go by just whatever a company says how it screwed up. Okay? It's like asking you if you're a fighter or chess player or baseball player or whatever to give an assessment and how you lost the game or lost the match or screwed up. You're going to be not as self-reflecting, not as harsh on yourself. This is why if you're a company and you want to get a real reality of a situation of what's going on in your company, you hire an outside auditor or accounting company to look at you as an unbiased, unconnected auditor or accounting of what you've done with your company. So you got the Navy, they're doing their own report. They're going to downplay a lot of what they did wrong. And then you've got the CIA as an outside auditor coming in and looking at the situation and giving their own report. That's a good way to fix things. Because no one's ever going to be as self-critical of themselves as they should be. Oh yeah, I screwed up this, I screwed up that, but I didn't do this, I didn't do that. No one. Not even myself. That's just the way people are. But people are always very critical of others, much more than themselves. That's why, you never want to just rely on your own self-assessment. I mean, like, we had quizzes in high school. And then, the teacher, sometimes the teacher would either post the answers on the board or an overhead or pass around a key or whatever, and then she never would let us, even though he'd given the answers out, grade her own papers. She said, okay, pass your paper to the left, and then the ones on the far left, take those up and put them on the right. And so you'd have your neighbor would grade your tests. Because if you grade your own tests, oh, well, I didn't miss that one. I didn't miss that one. I didn't miss that one. You're not going to be as truthful, okay? So that's the way that works. So this is what we have with Jonathan Pollard. In his own assessment of what he did, he's untruthful. Okay? He minimizes the damage. Oh, but it's just our ally. Well, they should have been giving this information to them anyway, and they probably would have gotten it eventually. And I thought that the U.S. government was unfairly hiding information from the Israeli government that they should have been handing over as an ally. Well, again, that's not your assessment to make. If you don't agree with it, quit your job and go fucking run for president, okay? Anyway, it says Jonathan Pollard's short but intensive espionage career on behalf of Israel lasted from June of 1984 until his arrest on 21 November 1985. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit espionage on 5 June 1986 and was sentenced to life imprisonment on March 4th, 1987. See, there's a period of time there, you see, from November, when he gets caught, of 85 to June of 86, okay? And then there's another period of time from June of 86 to March 4th, 87, and that's when he does the Wolf Blitzer interview, because he was frustrated. He thought he was going to get out on his own recognizance on bail until his sentencing, but they didn't let him out. Following his guilty plea, which arose from a plea bargain, Pollard cooperated with the U.S. Department of Investigators, including officials of the intelligence community. Intensive post-plea debriefings of Pollard, cited by blank, review of document receipt records, yielded an extensive account of Pollard's espionage, objectives, activities, and compromised documents. A series of polygraph interviews tended to confirm that his cooperation with U.S. authorities was bona fide. So, see, there's another thing. When you have an egotist like Pollard, he's going to boast about, oh yeah, I stole this information and you guys didn't have this under security and I was able to get that and this and that, and oh, I just ran all through you guys and you weren't even aware of what was going on. So again, that's part of his ego, to boast about that in the debriefings. Oh, I just ran around all you guys. You know, you had no clue what was going on. And because I'm smarter than you, I'm better than you, I am the grand king poobah of espionage and intelligence, and you'll never be as smart as me because I'm the king. Okay? And whether he said those things or not, it doesn't matter. That's the inner thinking of his mind. You got to understand why people do things the way they do and why they never change. Like apparently prison didn't change Jonathan's thinking, okay, because he had a martyr syndrome. And as proof of a martyr syndrome, he had people protesting for him in Israel. And then while he's held hostage or held prisoner, okay, but now he's telling people, don't protest against the government for the hostages, even though people were doing the same fucking thing for me. Okay? Do as I say, not as I do. Okay? Anyway. Although Pollard was regarded by his former college professors and colleagues in naval intelligence as capable, if eccentric, scholar and intelligent analyst, his personal and employment history is replete with incidents of irresponsible behavior that point to significant emotional instability. Now, you're going to find that a lot when you read about a lot of spies in America. So you got, I can't remember everyone's name, but, you know, basically, it was their ego that caused them to spy. They thought they were smarter, just like the guy in the FBI who got caught, did a lot of damage, had a lot of our spies killed by Russian intelligence. He thought he was better and smarter than his superiors and other people around him, and that he was unjustly not promoted or not given jobs that he thought that he deserved because he was better or smarter than they are, right? So it all had to do with their ego. Same thing with this Aldrich Ames? He was passed up for promotions, I think drinking and stuff like that. He got disciplined, and so it always comes down to ego. They think, the Pollards and the Aldrich Ames of the world think they're better, they're smarter than the people they're working for. The people they're working for are just a bunch of dumbass bureaucrats, paper pushers waiting for that retirement that have nowhere near the intelligence and understanding that these brilliant intelligence people like Pollard and Aldrich Ames have, right? So their ego gets the best of them, so what do they decide to do? Well, if they don't appreciate me, then I'm going to find someone that will appreciate me and appreciate my brilliance. And this is how Russian intelligence and other intelligence agencies, even the Chinese, are able to run across American agents and convert them. They appeal to their ego. Yes, oh my God, you got all this information? This is incredible. You got to be the most brilliant fucking intelligence officer I've come across ever in all my years. All my years. Keep doing what you're doing and we'll reward you. So they play to the person's ego. Anyway, so we will continue with this and pick this up. I got to mark my spot here. And, you know, apparently 30 years of prison wasn't enough to cure Pollard of his ego. Apparently that won't happen until he's, 6 feet under. But I can spot him a mile away. It's all in the psychology, the reasoning for him doing what he did. He's no different than any of the other spies that have betrayed America. He's not unique. He's not special. He's not endowed with all these brilliant fucking intelligence, brain, whatever. He's an idiot, an egotist, a traitor. He's no different than Trump. A traitor to America. He's lucky that he did his espionage in America, because in other countries they would have killed him. They would have hung him for spying. If only we would have been so lucky. All right, till next time. Oh, and fuck you, Jonathan fucking Pollard. Go fuck yourself.